I'm Tyler Orton, and before we jump to today's interview, here are some of the top stories we're following at business in Vancouver. Layoff notices are now being issued by the Vancouver International Airport Authority. The move comes as YVR estimates that passenger traffic will drop from 26 million people prior to COVID-19 to between 8 and 15 million people over the next 3 years. And Ottawa is offering a new bridge financing program to the country's largest employers in a bid to stave off collapse for some. The large employer emergency financing facility will be open only to companies with at least $300 million in annual revenue. That's it for today. Now let's get going with our latest interview. With pressure mounting on tenants and landlords amid the pandemic, I think we know that the way that we rent is poised to change monumentally. And joining us on today's show to discuss what we should expect and how technology can play a part, it's Fuad Arafa. He is R&D manager at Live Rent, a technology company based right here in Vancouver. And Fuad, I want to thank you for joining us on the show today.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into kind of some of the bigger issues going on, I want you to talk to me a little bit about Live Rent. And maybe let's start off with this. What is the problem that you guys and your team are trying to solve right now?
Right. So when we first started a few years ago, we had this issue of always having a barrier of communication, the amount of paperwork we have to do just to rent out a unit. The setting up of appointments. There are so many hurdles that we were doing in a traditional way, in a way that the classical way taught us how to do rental in general. So we did that at the beginning, and then we realized that hey, the need to actually digitize this process actually is paramount in order for us to make the process smooth. And that's what we started with. We started with actually digitizing the process all the way from finding a place, which is the listing part of it, which is very ubiquitous and available everywhere, to the digitization of the contracts, the appointments, even when you are late for an appointment, we try to digitize the whole process. It was a very interesting approach. When we first got started with it, we found a lot of acceptance from many people, many demographic, especially from the younger generation, whereas there was a bit of resistance on the landlord side because they like the traditional way of doing things. Yeah,
it's interesting. I'm just thinking about my own experience. The last time I had to figure out like a rent situation, I remember it was towards the end of a month. I only had a few days to figure it out. So I was just hopping all over town, trying to find what I could land. And then I remember even just the process of signing the agreement. That was a pain because I had to get the copy, sign it, take it back. So, I mean, it's interesting that you guys are kind of realizing that there is a market for this digitization. And I do want to seize on something that you said a few moments ago with regards to the younger versus older generation. And I'm wondering, right, do you think that the pandemic has the opportunity to make certain demographics make a giant leap forward with regards to how well they accept new technologies and adopt new technologies?
Yeah, I think your question is actually spot on. It is one of the things that we are seeing in the trends. The adoption of the digital process is way more than before, especially on the landlord side. The landlords, had the power to not wanting to digitize. If they had the traditional way of doing things, they are more comfortable, especially the smaller landlords, the one that has only 1 or 2 units. This one, they didn't really have a huge reason to digitize things. They could put something on Craigslist and get a couple of communications about it, and off you go. But with the COVID-19 and the pandemic and people wanting to have that isolation and that distancing, we actually found the adoption actually increasing and skyrocketing, which is pretty good for us.
What does it mean being a company that's here in Vancouver, or at least on the West Coast? Because, of course, Vancouver is notorious for having low vacancy rates. So I wonder if this is just kind of an extreme market to work with and experiment in, because it might not be representative of, say, I don't know, what the market is in Winnipeg or Edmonton, for example.
Right. So the peak time for us is May to August. We are seeing the same peaks still actually visible, the same peaks. It's not in the same numbers, even in Vancouver. You're right. I don't think Vancouver speaks to all the cities in the world, or sorry, in Canada. And I don't have a huge statistics on the on Winnipeg, but if we look at more bigger cities or cities that we actually track, like Montreal and Toronto, we do actually see the trends that are very similar. Still, the demand is there. People are still renting. It's not they are hesitant to rent in the pandemic. They're still willing to rent out and to seek new rentals. People are still doing it. But what we found is that they have more demand on newer approaches to the rental process. So, for example, we saw a huge spike in videos and video tours and things like this. This is the kind of things we are seeing the shift in. And the numbers are still actually fairly good in all. It might have to do something with the fact that Airbnb is down, so people, the inventory is there. People are more happy to go and rent. But on the other side, we do see sometimes that in some places where some people are just staying put, they're not moving as much. There's both equations we're seeing them at play.
Well, that fascinates me because I'll be honest, like before we jumped on to our interview, I went and I was doing like listings, like searching for rental listings just to get a taste of what the market's looking like right now. And there's a lot of offers of, say, if you want to do a viewing, let's make sure it's we're well socially distanced, etc. Like they're making sure that people feel comfortable. You bring up the video tours, like that's an interesting thing to me. Do you anticipate even more of that to accelerate, like people to be even more concerned with keeping a safe distance as we get into this new reality of renting right now?
Yeah, so the video spikes actually was not a surprise to me. We did anticipate it actually, and we did plan for it to increase, and we did see a threefold at least increase in the video production for our user base at least. People are playing them even more often than before. So the demand is on both sides. On the landlord, they feel more comfortable putting a video of their product, and the tenant is more happy to see it and be able to do the whole signing completely online.
So I'm also thinking about, just from your perspective, we have this new reality of renting right now. Technology is obviously something that we're going to have to get used to at this point. But I mean, what are some of the basics that people should be thinking about right now when it comes to, I guess, this step towards digitization? What should they be prepared for? What adjustments do they even need to make on their part?
It's a very, very good question. One of the things is being able to share their private information a little bit more liberally. So this is one thing we used to see actually. I mean, I did say that younger generation do adopt the technology much faster, but we do see resistance for them. We did see resistance from their side trying to give up their personal information, but not recently, not in the last at least month or so. We see them more willing to give up their IDs because we do have this ID verification in our Live score. Whenever we actually onboard a renter, we actually have to put them through a verification process that we need to make sure that they are actually valid and true, and they are who they are, and their credit score is valid, and so on. So nowadays we're seeing a much more acceptance from the tenant side. They are willing to give their information much more willingly, much more liberally, in order to be verified, in order to actually unblock the rental process, because they do see that there's a blockage when they come to renting, and they have to give that ID and so on.
Well, I also wonder about the landlord side of things, though.
Yeah.
Are you guys focused on certain kinds of landlords? Is it the smaller ones, the ones that are responsible for hundreds of units? So what's your, I guess, particular client base?
We actually, it's actually a big base. So we do have people with 1,000 units and above, and we do have people with only 1 or 2 units. We have the full spectrum. We're lucky actually to have the full spectrum. So it allows us to really observe how the bigger groups are actually behaving, and the smaller groups how they are behaving. From the landlord side, and when you asked about the technology side and the landlords, they have to do the same thing. They need to be ready to give up documentation on their ownership of the properties. We have to start vetting these ones, that they are properly vetted for the rental process in our platform. Another thing the landlords need to start accepting, and this is one of the things actually we found very difficult at the beginning. They need to start accepting the digital process in general. So one of the biggest problems we had at the beginning from the landlord side is that we asked them, what is it that you are looking in a tenant? And they say, oh, it's a gut feeling. When I see a tenant, it's a gut feeling. I have to see them. I need to talk to them, and that's how I judge whether he is going to be a good tenant. And that is very special. That is very visible in the not younger, but in the smaller landlords. The bigger landlords, they just need statistics. Give me their Equifax. Give me this. Give me that. Give me some numbers. The younger ones, the smaller ones, they tend to be a little bit different. So now that is one thing they have to start giving up. As in, it's not only your gut feeling. You have to start measure that gut feeling. So this is one thing that they have to start hitting it.
And I also wonder, do you think that we might have more landlords suggesting, hey, why don't I talk to you over Zoom or something like that, just to get a sense of who it might be that they're letting into their building?
Yes. Actually, we do see requests coming for. Live chats and so on, these kind of services, and they're coming on our platform hopefully soon.
Well, maybe I'll leave us on our conversation with this last question, though. But with the economy facing so much uncertainty right now, you mentioned earlier that you're seeing the typical spikes that you would see, starting in May. But do you think that there's going to be even more movement as people maybe look to find less expensive accommodation just amid uncertainty? Or are we in kind of a bit of a static mode right now because we don't know if we should be moving at this very moment?
That's a very good question. It's a very uncharted territory. We haven't seen this one before. I am actually really excited. I am monitoring our statistics so closely, very vigilantly. Every day we're looking at statistics, trying to figure out how the market is going to shift, what is the people are going to ask for next, and so on. I don't know how the market is going to shift, but I do see that the move to digitize everything is going to happen. All the way from setting up an appointment, listing your property, signing your contract, everything you do has to become digital. In terms of supply and demand, that for sure we are going to see a small trickle, ticker going up and down for a bit until we figure out exactly where the sweet spot is and how it's going to play. I do anticipate the trends to be very similar to other years, as in the people desire to move, the people desire to, that desire, I don't think it dissipated yet. The people want to move and go into different places. We might see a shift, as in instead of starting in the bigger numbers to start in May, maybe it will shift in 1 or 2 months, until they open up the isolation a little bit. That's something I anticipate to happen. Even though we see the trends behaving, I think the bigger numbers might shift a little bit in the ground.
Okay, well, I lied. Maybe I have one last question because now I'm curious about this. But what do you think about potential shifts when it comes to student populations? Because who knows how students are going to be interacting with their schools, if it's going to be a lot more remote learning. Do they actually need to live close to campuses? Are you anticipating that maybe the way that students, younger generations rent, it's going to fundamentally change if we're looking towards the end of the summer, closer to September, October?
The scene around students is something that we are actually studying very, very, very much right now, because we are trying to understand how all these properties around, for example, UBC, SFU, how they're going to be behaving. I myself also have kids that go to school, go to universities, and they are doing everything online. We do see some shifts in some students moving back to homes. but not the international. The international scene is still here, and we do have international people coming, and actually they are still renting. And I am aware of a few students that actually rent on our platform, even some students from our co-op and intern teams that they are still in the rental process and they do use the platform and so on. So I have a gut feeling that we are going to see like a small change in our graph, but it's not going to be that drastic. The dip is warranted. I mean, it's crazy to state that there is not going to be a dip with all that's happening. There is going to be a minor dip maybe, but I don't know how I am as curious as you are, honestly, on seeing how the market is going to behave right now.
Well, it's still early days yet, and so I'd love to follow up with you in the coming weeks and months, just as there's more information and the more that you can understand about the statistics and data as well. I think that would be a great conversation. But for now, Fuad, I want to thank you for joining us on the show.
It's my pleasure, and I hope to be here again.
That's excellent. That's Fuad Arafa. He is the R&D manager at Live Rent, and that's it for the show today. But we'll be back tomorrow. For now, you can go to biv.com for more videos, more news stories, more podcasts, everything you need to know about business in British Columbia.